everybody. You're listening to the Comic Book Bears podcast. I'm Billy Z.
I'm Steve Morey.
And we're back with you after an extended break. I have to tell everybody this. We actually recorded an episode right after we finished up with Heroes Con, and we sounded so tired, there was no way I could release it. So it's been a long time since we've been with you, but we are back with you, and we're going to give you some updates about what's been happening with us and with the show and with comics, with what we're reading. But before we do that, we have a very special guest who's going to join us. He's the artist and writer of the graphic novel series Occultation. Occultation II was a very successful Kickstarter, and right now, Thom Collins is kickstarting Occultation III, a gay graphic novel set in a dystopian future. So you're going to hear one of our standard explosions. We're going to start the show right off with our interview with Thom, and then we'll be back with you right after the interview's over and talk about some other stuff. Okay, we're back, and we're thrilled to bring to the show for the first time Thom Collins. Thom is the writer and artist of Occultation II, which was a remarkably successful Kickstarter graphic novel project. And he is back with another Kickstarter for the next graphic novel in that series, which is Occultation III. And if you are unfamiliar with the dystopian world of Occultation, it does feature a main character who is 6'7", 340-pound gay male. So, Thom, I don't want to talk about your life when I have you to talk about it. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us all about this project that you're currently kickstarting?
Well, my name is Thom, and my project is a graphic novel I have been working on. And when I say this out loud, it kind of makes me feel a little sad, but I'm 51 years old, I should say, and I actually started working on this when I was about 19. As I was an artist, or I still am an artist. I was in college in Cal Arts, and I was taking painting, and I only attended for a semester after dropping out. I dropped out because that's a whole other story, but for the most part, it just wasn't for me. But I started working on this book way back in the day when I was 19 years old. Like I said, I was really into Heavy Metal magazine, and one of the problems I had with heavy metal, I didn't have a problem with heavy metal that way. I just was really bummed that they didn't have any strong gay characters. And when the gay characters were involved in some kind of storyline, it was always the traditional victim. And it kind of bummed me out. So I set out to do my own, so to speak. But the reason why it took so long is because I discovered something about my art that I didn't even know was a problem or anybody else shared. And that is, I could draw whatever I see perfectly fine. If I'm looking at you, Bill, for instance, and you're looking right at me, I could draw your likeness and have no problem. If I were to walk away then and someone would say, now draw Bill smiling and turning at a 45-degree angle, I couldn't achieve that because in my mind, I can't view it well enough to represent or to recreate your face without you actually being there. So I would start working on characters, and I would go through the whole process of trying to get them looking what they would look like with certain facial features at certain angles, top, bottom, left, right. And I would oftentimes get frustrated. I mean, you have to think this was way before computers. I was doing this all on paper. And the consistency drove me crazy. I kind of wanted to just give up, and sometimes I did. And then I would start a few years later, try it again, and then get frustrated and stop. But make a long story short, I work in multimedia, and I am a award-winning designer and worked in a lot of advertising firms, and started working in 3D to expand my creative horizons. And so this is one of the things that really irks me a little bit, is how long this took for me to understand. So I'll make myself clear in a second. So I'm working in 3D, doing sculpting and creating products and creating people. And 5 years later, I'm like, holy cow, I can like sculpt my characters, and then I can turn them around and I can see what they would look like at all angles. And so I was like 5 years later, after wasting 5 years not even thinking about that, I started sculpting my first character, Ellis. And because I wasn't really knowledgeable about ZBrush, I had got ZBrush, and I had to spend countless hours with tutorials about how to do the simplest things because it's quite robust. But once I finished doing Ellis, I think it took about 6 to 8 months, and I had a finished design. I honestly just started to cry going, oh my God, that's my character right there. And I can spin him around and I can see what his ear would look like if it was over here. I could see what his eyes would look like if I scrunched them out, all that stuff. So that's began. I thought, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try to use these models like I was in art school using the little wooden stick posable mannequins. You know what those are?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's basically what I did. I just created a character in a 3D program so I can use as reference for facial features and be consistent, which was one of the major problems I had is the consistency of the characters looking alike throughout the process of drawing every possible expression you could possibly have. So that's pretty much what that process went.
Okay, and in terms of the world that you've crafted for Occultation, when I first read 2, it seems that there was an almost encyclopedia of backstory.
Yes, and that was perfect. That was intended.
Yeah, I really enjoyed how it touched on so many elements that, though this is a story that's set in the 25th century, there's a lot of issues regarding religious fundamentalism and even environmentalism that you touch on that very much resonate today. So if you were giving an elevator pitch to a film producer, okay, let's put it that way. Let's put it that way, because Reader's Digest version kind of doesn't carry any weight anymore in public psyche. What would you say in a very brief contextualization what this story is about?
Oh, Bill, this is a really hard question.
Okay.
It really is, but I will try to answer it as best I can. So what the story is basically about, and without giving up too much of spoilers, but I guess, if you want to be held, I'm going to probably end up doing it anyways. It's what I decided to do. So if you hate spoilers, this might bum you out. But so the story in a nutshell is basically over when it's all said, done, and complete, starts from 2083 to the year 2483. And what it basically is what would happen if right-wing religious fundamentalists took over, gained power, and did all those horrible things that everyone realizes what would happen. And I thought what it would be like if you went way out into the future and that was still happening, what would the world be like? And how would people handle it? So they would handle it, I was hoping that would make it really interesting, is they would leave the planet and go elsewhere to start over again. But because human beings need to have past understanding and keep their their artifacts, like great works of art, music, and literature, they basically decided that they were going to go back. They had this underground type railroad thing happening where they tried to rescue people, objects, and art and all that kind of stuff, and how they were able to go back to Earth, capture these things, and bring them to the new world called Janus. And that's kind of the high level view. Now, there is a whole hell of a lot, and it took me a hell of a long time to get all these, what I was visualizing as story threads. And so these story threads we're basically following about 3 to 4 different stories. And those stories are happening along a timeline at the same pace. And you're jumping from story to story, and you're only being fed bits of information at a time. And what I'm trying, and hopefully if I'm successful, that people will start noticing a certain pattern and noticing smaller hidden subliminal messages, which I have plenty put in, all the way down to even the characters' names. So what I want to say about that really quick, I probably went over my time.
Don't worry about that.
I even thought about the characters' names on a level that most people probably wouldn't even consider to research. But Ellis is actually a Greek name for one of God or is of God. And Oswin, which is another character, happens to be Ellis's best friend. Is his name in Greek mythology or what have you is God's friend. And so what I did the reason why I did that is because on Earth, now here's where the little spoilers might be if you haven't read 2. So Oswin is basically acting like the hand of God. His role was to set forth the black hole that would generate in the middle of Earth, putting out the misery and suffering on Earth, which all the civilians on Earth were expecting to happen anyways, the end of days to happen. And Oswin was that person, just happened to be named Ellis, who happened to bring the end of times to Earth. And Oswin being his best friend, those names connections I thought were really cool. So there's also a lot of other things like that running through the story. I only actually had 2 people message me asking if that was my intent. And I was like, yes, oh my God, thank God. Yeah, someone's Googling everything on my book and like finding out all these little hidden secrets. But so that actually made me feel better.
Okay, I'm going to throw the interview baton over to Steve. Steve, it's only a 2-man race this time. So, Steve, what do you have for Thom?
Well, that's funny that you would mention that. I of course, that went over my head because I really don't have a lot of background with, names, meanings, and, that kind of historical context. But it was this story, I think, was really great. And like you said, there are multiple threads that you keep moving throughout the books. How do you, as a writer as well as the artist, how do you keep those structures moving so that everything is sort of going towards your ultimate conclusion, which I'm believing will happen at the end of Occultation III, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But how do you keep all those threads moving? And because you've been working on this for such a long time, moving towards that inevitable conclusion for your characters.
So, I have I wish I could, if I could turn my computer to show you, I have a stack of notebooks, and so I don't really consider myself a writer. Oddly enough, I just kind of knew about the story I wanted to write, and I kind of had this very broad idea of what I wanted to do, and I would kind of sit and think about, well, what would be really good kind of things that would happen in a story that doesn't necessarily need to be part of the story yet, but then later I can use. And there's a couple of movies out there like that really kind of inspired me to even do more and push more. And one of them that came out later was Cloud Atlas.
Mm-hmm.
I was so happy to see that movie because it was something that validated my own thoughts. Like, wow, half this movie I'm sitting back going, what the hell is going on? And it was almost at the point where I was like, I totally want to walk out on this. But the payoff at the end was so awesome. I'm like going, yes, that's what I want. That's the kind of thing I want, in that same kind of vein of like you're reading something and you're going, what? And then slowly you might like read it again and think, oh, that's kind of interesting. Like so really quick, the sex scenes in O2, a lot of people would just imagine that I injected them in just for the sake of having sex. But one of my friends, who I didn't even mention this, actually wrote me about the intent behind the 3 sex scenes. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Someone actually kind of read into that. But they're the three homosexual type standard sexual experiences some people experience. And the first one is like, lack of a better description, prison rape, where, it's not about sex, it's about domination. And then the second one is basically, I'm not gay because I'm not going to kiss you. So that doesn't make me gay, but I'll do everything else. So that was that representation. And then the third scene was just love. And I thought those were separated enough to get people to look at and go, I wonder about that too. And of course someone did, and that made me happy. Just one, but that's all, that's all that matters at the moment, really.
Oh, I mean, that is something now that you're talking about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that does make sense. That's the feelings that you do get, you see the different types of scenes, and obviously, as part of the backstory on this world that you've created, there's a much larger percentage of gay men, for plot reasons, and then of course the crew from Janus, Ellis and Oswin, etc. Like those men, of course, really do represent an interesting masculine gay ideal, but also present themselves a little bit differently. There's a lot more sensitivity. There's a lot more emotion. The conversations between them are real conversations that one would have today. There just seemed to be a lot of realism there, and I thought that was pretty ingenious to really inject that in.
When I was doing this book was actually made my life extremely hard, and that was I decided not to use any expositional dialogue. I hate that in movies, and I would imagine it would play out the same way when you're reading through a graphic novel. And the other was I didn't want to use any kind of sound effect bubbles like bam, wow, zap, or rip, or whatever like that. And that was only because I just wanted to see if I can do it. I wanted it to be really cinematic, and I just couldn't visualize it being cinematic if it had those, Batman type, Robin type pow things going on. And not that I think those are wrong. I just wanted to present something a little bit different and see if I can do it. That's basically the truth of it. And the whole thing about, like, I have answers for everything, you'll probably discover. But there is a reason why storyline wise, why there are a lot of gay men and why there are a lot of gay men on Janus. And there are two other planets, but they aren't mentioned quite as often. But then that's all going to be explained in hopefully Occultation I, which is basically a prequel, which, by the way, is where the story crests. It's not the last two, it's the first one, which will fully bring everything together and hopefully get people to go, oh my God, that's awesome. I don't know. We'll see. There are some very subtle, and I'm looking at the script thinking maybe this might be too subtle, maybe I don't know. We'll see. I do this a lot. I just question myself as I go along.
No, I think that's pretty amazing, and also the fact that you do have notebooks that are telling you, plus your own feeling and the long years of planning for this, where everything's going to go, and that's not spoilery to say that it crests in the prequel. I think that's pretty cool. It's a very interesting direction to go to. Now, I did want to mention artistically because your work is beautiful, and I know you talked about you do a lot of your sculpting and your modeling in 3D, so you can get all of the perspectives of your characters. Do you have other real life examples that you use as references for your characters as well? Because again, the art is very lifelike, and it's just really amazing to see that.
Well, yeah. So what I decided to do with Occultation III is my husband is in it. He is playing. There was a different looking character, but I decided to actually put my own husband's face on that body, so to speak. So he is playing Tillman, and
cool.
that is Ellis's brother. And there are a couple of people who are actually friends of mine that I put in the novel. The reason why I did this is because I just wanted to, and I thought it would be really awesome. And it was actually a little hard for me because this really nice guy, Jim, is playing the worst awful character I could imagine. It was really hard for me to. He was like in charge of the NMO, and he is a ruthless, kind of a sick bastard. And it was hard for me because I look at his face, and he's like a really sweet guy. He's well liked, and I'm like, but he's playing this horrible person. I have to put his face on these horrible situations, and it was different. It was kind of I felt bad. My process is very complex and complicated, mostly because I guess I made it bad for myself. But it all starts on paper. I don't have to really worry about details until I throw it in or scan the page into the scanner to get it into the computer, so I can start then adding line after line and color after color. And usually what happens is when I usually, if I'm working on, for instance, like Tyler, big giant beard, I've actually created special Photoshop brushes just for that character, for his hair and his beard, and skin texture and tattoos. These are all wrapped around basically using Photoshop to keep the graphic consistency. I have a feeling no one's going to really ever notice that. Putting a tattoo and it being slightly different in one, but for me, it's like so weird. I have to have it look like it's in a friggin' movie, for crying out loud. So I need these hard steps just to get this done. But once the line art gets put in, I basically keep working in blackline. I have a huge Wacom tablet, and the hardest part is the black lining, and that is just getting all the shading. Mm-hmm. And the black lines in as clear as possible, because the coloration is actually super easy. The black lines, kind of, depending on how close they are or how grungy the lines are, actually take care of shading as well. I could use the same color underneath it, but I don't. Of course, I have to make it more realistic, so I add quite a lot of layers. Each image, if you know anything about Photoshop, has roughly about 40 layers, mm-hmm. Probably 15 types of effects to some of these layers, and could get up to about 2 to 3 gigs in size. So they're quite large.
Oh yeah. And actually, when you mentioned that you also made you created some of your own brushes, there are people who do notice that. Just so you know, because my husband's one of them. So, he, one of his mentors from university, now actually makes a career creating brushes. So there are artists out there.
That makes me nervous, because now he's going to say, "See, use that brush there," and I can tell that. Damn.
No, I think that's incredible. It's definitely a great skill, and not only does it help your own art, but there is the possibility that it might help other artists as well in achieving some of the same effects.
And to be fair, some of the backgrounds I've cheated. Hopefully, I consider it cheating. My husband doesn't. I still think it does, but I actually bought some 3D backgrounds, some 3D sets, and again, because I wanted to be able to spin these sets around depending on the scene, and there be consistency, like as if there was going to be one of those continuity people from a movie set there going, "Hey, that can was over there, now it's over here." I'm literally driving myself insane with these thoughts, so I need help. I know.
And Bill, I'm gonna ask this question. I bet you're probably thinking the same thing too. Mm-hmm. You couched a lot of how you're talking about how you design, your pages, how you design your characters, how you design the sets and the setting as very cinematic. Mm-hmm. Do you think at some future point, when you've completed the trilogy, that this might be something that could possibly be filmed?
I react in two ways when I hear that. One, to me, it makes me feel kind of warm and fuzzy when someone says that. I think, oh my God, that would be overly fantastic. I think I would just like explode with happiness. But the reality is, what makes me a little sad is like my second thought is they would make Ellis not be gay, and he would fall in love with some woman, and then that whole dynamic of Ellis being a rescuer of someone who's weaker and fears everything, growing up on a planet where they virtually had to hide from everything just so they wouldn't be put to death for looking the wrong way, kind of thing. That whole dynamic would be gone, I think, and that would, although I don't really play that whole thing up in both 2 and 3, I'm kind of hoping that people would understand that why would Ellis does fall for Reese. Reese is a much younger cubby guy, and I've had a couple of people go, why didn't you make him bigger, blah blah blah. I just wanted him to stand for someone who has been scared all their lives, and I didn't see a character big, tall, and strong as that role. So that's why he is a lot smaller, and besides, I thought it was kind of hotter.
Hey, hey, there you go. You're the creator, so you get to put your characters together any way you want.
But it's weird how people feel free to tell you what you should have done instead. It's like, do your own book. Here's some.
I think it was a great idea. Yeah, I think it was a great idea to put Ellis together with Reese and have Reese be representative of a person that they rescued. I mean, he was one that they rescued, and it just makes sense to, or it's logical that Ellis might actually find something romantic about one of the people that he saved.
Yeah, and there's
awesome.
Lots of men out there who are caregivers. They like the rescue. They like the taking care of people. And I have a couple of friends who are very giving, outwardly caregiving type people, and I find that like my husband's like that. He gets a little carried away because he's a fixer. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just want to be able to talk about a problem, but he will want to fix it for me. And yeah, I married a man. But to have a movie would be like phenomenal. I actually thank you for saying that, but I actually really don't see that ever happening. But that would be awesome.
You never know.
You never know. But
one thing I have to ask is, I'm fascinated how you, from a business perspective, approach this in interpreting the 3 volumes. Going in the midpoint, putting that out first. Were there any elements that you intended for 1 that are changing because of how the project moved on?
Yes. There was, yes.
Yeah.
So when I first started this, the book was just over 600 pages. I had blotted it all out and penciled it all in. It's like, wow, that's a lot. I checked to see how much it would cost to get something like that printed. And like Occultation 1 cost $5,600. This was $13,000. And that was like out of control. That's not even a Kickstarter. I couldn't even start that. So I started looking at the story and wondering, could I like do part 1, 2, and 3? And I thought, well, yeah, that would be kind of a cool thing to do. And then I thought, but I don't want to start at the beginning. And I looked at I kind of broke the pages up. Now, Occultation 1 is supposed to be 250 pages long. So depending on the success of this Kickstarter, any money that I have above and beyond what I need, I'm going to save directly into the efforts of making Occultation 1 uncut, the full length. But what you said, I'll get to your question now. Sorry.
No problem.
There was a huge scene in 02 that I cut. Actually, there's 2 scenes that I thought, what am I doing? This would be much better in 1. And the reason why is because Occultation 1, the first half of that this novel is actually taken directly from my life. There are two characters in at the beginning of this novel, Occultation I, Hagen and Bevel. And I know Bevel's a weird name, but it's been a working name for so long. I've never changed it, never found anything that worked better, so I kind of kept it. But those two characters meet in college, and Hagen's like a football playing type guy, and Bevel's a surfer dude type guy. And the story of them getting together is basically the story of me getting together with my first, who, that was kind of a sad part, who died of cancer. And 5 years later, but in the Occultation I did not include that. But there's a lot of situations in that in 01 that are taking directly out, even dialogue. Because as I lived it, I didn't think it was such a big deal, but or not a big deal. It's not the right terminology. I didn't think it was special until I got much older, and I'm like going, you know what? The way I got together with my first, that was kind of awesome. And to give you a quick little synopsis, is I am extremely, you can ask anybody that knows me, if you're flirting with me, you actually need to throw a brick at my head. I just have this really bad receptor on being hit on, and he knew that. And what had happened is we went to lunch, and one time my first and he said, I really think I need to apologize to you. And I'm like, oh, why? And he's like, well, I think I've been making you feel a bit uncomfortable. I've been hitting on you. And he's this really big football type guy. He was a lineman on the football team. So like, yeah, I like Bears even way back then. But when he said that, I thought one of two things, and he's fucking with me or he's really liking me. I said the bad word. Is that okay?
Oh, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Don't you fucking worry about it.
So I thought, is he fucking with me or is this for real? And he basically said, yeah, I've been hitting on you for all this time, and I get it. You're not interested, and I just wanted to apologize. And I'm like, oh no, I'm interested. I'm like, holy cow, are you kidding me? So in a nutshell, that's what that happened. And then we were together ever since, and it was awesome. A lot of things that happened in our lives. And when I was first writing this novel, seriously, the first time was, I think, about 20 years ago. Such a long time ago. I thought to put those in because like I said, I wasn't very good at writing, but I could emulate a lot of things that happened and just recreate them for the novel, and maybe switch some things around and stuff like that. So yeah, the storyline in one is going to hopefully wrap up everything in a nice little bow and introduce some possibilities that I wonder if people will speculate over and maybe talk about and wonder, why was that? So what? I'll just say this for the sake of ruining too much. Someone's going to either think I'm really bad at writing and I have to repeat things, or there's something else going on underneath that dialogue. And I want the latter. I want people to go, oh, why was this here and then this over here? They could be together kind of thing. This dialogue conversation seems really familiar. And I want that. I want people to actually read that and go, that seems familiar. Why does that seem familiar? And then try to put the pieces together. It's not, the frustrating part about this whole project is it's not just a gay graphic novel that has bears in it that have sex. And it's hard not to be able to put myself into some kind of category. And I did not want it to be a porn graphic novel. And I didn't want it to be just a standard graphic novel. I wanted it to be more. Of course, I like the sex in it. I'm a gay man, but you know what I mean.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Now, in one, are we going to see a substantial bit of origin for the 592? Because that's the bit of the entire storyline that fascinates me.
Yes.
Yeah.
And one is the origins of why they even call themselves that, and how the NMO is dealing with what's going on. I could give you this little bit of information, basically what the premise is, and what you'll see. It's basically, so they've noticed that, scientists have noticed that there's more gay men being born now than ever before. They're estimating 7 out of 10 are identifying as gay. And this is only happening on males. Women are basically being born the same rate as before, when it comes to having a lesbian child. And their idea of what this might be is because the population has exploded to the point where nature is now starting to try and dumb down the population, or dumb down, I mean, bring down the number of people being born. So with that, I also thought, well, how would religious right-wing fundamentalists deal with something like this? Would they think it was the end times? They probably would. They probably would react horrifically out of fear of what's going to happen, and at the end of the days are coming, and they actually want that kind of stuff. So they create the NMO, New Moral Order, and very viciously try to take out everyone who, and this extends to even people of color, and then in children. And that's why the first one, you never saw children. You didn't see women. You didn't see anyone of color. There was no black people in it. There was a reason for that. A friend of mine who is in 03 really desperately wanted to be in the NMO. And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, he wanted to be a bad guy originally. I said, I'm sorry, you can't be a bad guy. He's like, why earth not? I go, well, it's like asking the if you could join the KKK. It's not just going to work. It won't happen. And then he was like really bummed about it. So but he plays Asa. ASA is Vincent Keith. I don't know if you guys know him or not, but amazingly sweet guy. And I think his character came out pretty well.
Okay, so in connection with promoting your series there, I noticed that you attended the Queers in Comics conference in San Francisco early. What was that experience like? Because I did go to the first one in New York.
If anything, I met Ed.
Okay.
Yeah, I adore his work, and I was actually holding his book in my hand to buy it when he approached me. He's like, "Hey," and we started talking about it stuff. But it was good. I'm not really a comic book, and I think that I don't know how to say this properly, I suppose, but I felt very welcome. Don't get me wrong, but I know that I felt like I was a little bit of a poser because I wasn't doing like the traditional comic book, and although I did speak, and I was received quite well, I personally felt like I might have done better if there was a graphic novel type thing going on. But I did learn a lot. I really valued the experience. I thought everyone there was super sweet and super nice, and I just wish that I wasn't so fucking shy, which I am in real life if I'm in an environment like that. And I think that's probably what the whole problem was, is that I'm not very outwardly going, and it's not for any other reason than that's just the way I am in person when I don't know anybody. I kind of quiet. So I loved the trip. I stayed with some friends in San Francisco and stayed in a really nice house and a condo. I guess that doesn't make any difference. But, and the experience was really great. But the promotion part, I guess, is what you're also asking for. Is I'm terrible at self promotion. I'm trying to get my husband to be my publicist.
Right.
And he says he will, but yes, it's weird that I can take all these. It took about 3 years to do Occultation II because I had to develop a technique, and all that time you think I would just be throwing myself out there, but I actually had to rely on some good friends to help promote me because I just don't know how to do it properly.
Right.
And being an artist, putting yourself out there, you always run the risk of being run the risk of running into people who just despise your work for some reason, and they need to tell you. And those always, I wish I was the kind of person that would be able to absorb those and just let those people just not affect me whatsoever. But it does. It always seems to, because this is a very personal project to me, and I didn't do it for the sake of getting people horny or for the I say that for specific reasons. I get a lot of comments about the fact that there's actual sex in the graphic novel. It's like I don't understand why that's a problem.
Yeah. I can totally appreciate, as somebody who had a Kickstarter that was successful last year, a project that I wrote, I can say that I can be a great champion for other people's creative endeavors. When it comes to my own, I shrivel up.
So like, why is
Yeah.
that?
I do not know. I do not know. I think you touched on it because you are putting elements of your true self out there. And if you do get negative feedback, or at worst, ambivalence, it's hard to process sometimes. So, and actually, you're giving me food for thought about why I've been a failure in this one area. But I do appreciate how difficult that can be. Another thing, I just wanted to ask you, we've gone through your process and how, basically the technology didn't exist when you were 19 to really get this project done the way that you wanted to realize. I'm just wondering, like, who would you point as influences? I know you had mentioned heavy metal, so I assume Mobius and other creators like that would be but I'm just really interested to see what wells you think you may have pulled water from, because this is so different. As Steve had said, it's very photorealistic, but it's also hyper stylized at the same time. I'm just really interested to hear who really influenced you, and maybe it might be somebody that surprised you that you didn't even know got into your creative DNA.
Oh no, I know exactly. I can answer that because Mobius is was big in heavy metal in the early 80s, around that time, and I stared at his work for hours without even having to read anything. I just stared at his work, and I'm like, I loved his style. It's nothing like mine. His is very simple and flat, but all his lines were just really amazing. And then there was I might say his name wrong, but Eniki Banal. He did Immortals. I don't know if that sounds familiar.
All I can say, sir, is if you're talking about a Metal Hurlant artist, I'm sure we're all saying them wrong.
Eniki, I believe, is how you say his first name.
Yeah.
But his work was amazing to me too. He did, if you're not familiar, he did this whole work with this woman with blue hair, and she had blue tears, and it was in this really strange world in the future where Egyptian gods were coming to life and controlling this man, and it was such a weird story, but it was so weird and so alien that's what I loved about it. It's like, I wouldn't predict this. So this is like just really lighting me up, because I just think it's really awesome. And then there was Richard Corbin, who did Den.
Mm-hmm.
He was a big muscly guy with a huge thing. But that wasn't that's what was the reason why I liked it. I liked it because he also created a really strange world. But to be fair, he had women with just enormous breasts. Mm-hmm. And everyone in his universe, walked around naked. But it was still a really cool story. And lastly, and I have to be careful with the name again, but I do remember the character. I still have his book. It's Ranxerox. Mm-hmm. Which you won't believe, but if you look him up, the early concepts of Ellis was inspired by Ranxerox, believe it or not. The early drawings, because when I first started thinking about doing the novel, the concept of what it should look like was completely different. It wasn't until it wasn't until I really started getting involved and getting serious with the story about 10 years ago, I started changing up the way the look should look, the look and feel of the novel. And I can't think of anybody else right off the top of my head, but those were the huge inspirations. And plus movies like Blade Runner, which I absolutely loved, and Star Wars, of course. Mm-hmm. All those types of movies. I think Blade Runner for me was a little bit stronger. I loved that whole universe of Blade Runner. I thought that looked incredible. And yeah, so that was even more of an inspiration than anything like Star Wars or anything.
Before we finish with Tom there, Steve, is there anything else you want to get in?
Well, I had to look up Richard Corbin when you mentioned him. I'm like, I have seen his work before. But yeah, no, I don't think I have anything else other than the fact that I'm really excited to see how you're going to end Occultation at the beginning. I'm really intrigued by it because the whole backstory that leads up to where we come in as readers in 2 and 3. I'm just really excited to see that. Where everything.
I certainly hope it pays off. I'm taking a gamble, but I'm going to see how it pays off.
Okay, Tom, if people want to back the Kickstarter or get in touch with you on the interwebs, or if you have a website, why don't you let us all know about that right now?
So I do have, in a Kickstarter, it's kind of weird. You just have to go into graphic novels. There's comics, then subheading graphic novels, and look for Occultation III. And you'll find it. Unfortunately, you can get the links off. The only way you can get it is links off my Facebook page, which I also don't know how to say, but I do have a web page. It's called 592.com, but it's number 5, IVE, the number 9, INE, and then the number 2, WO, because I couldn't have these simple numbers. So I had to have that. So, otherwise you can search on Facebook for Occultation and Occultation 3, and you'll find it quite easily.
Okay, great. And this is just a reminder to everybody who's listening that the Kickstarter campaign goes until August 9th. Where are we at here now? Well, you're almost at the 75% mark.
Yeah.
If you're listening and this sounds like it's within your wheelhouse, please go over to Tom's Kickstarter and let's get this realized. Tom, it's really been a real pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for agreeing to talk to us.
Oh, you're welcome. I was a little nervous. I really don't do this quite often. I just didn't know what to expect. So it's been very relaxing. It's been the opposite of what I thought it would be like. So, yeah.
We're really happy to have you. It's great hearing about your process, hearing about your history as an artist and the history of your work. So thank you so much for taking time to talk with us.
All right, no problem.
Okay.
Cheers, you guys.
All right, Steve, we're back, and why don't we tell people what we've been up to since the last time we joined them on the podcast interweb waves, or however the hell you call what would be
the interweb waves. Sure.
The interweb waves.
That works. That works. Like you had said at the beginning of the show, we had we had recorded a quick episode right after we had Heroes Con, and oh man, that was exhausting. It was an exhausting long weekend. But that's, just to say what we were up to in June, or at least what I was up to in June, was Heroes Con. That was my big focus for that. And it's actually the biggest comic event in Charlotte during the course of the year. Among the other comic conventions and small shows that we have, Heroes Con is definitely the big one. And Bill came down for it, and we also had Brian and his partner Pat up as well. The only person missing was Justin, but we had a great time, had some great friends with us as well, and got to see a lot of great stuff at the show. Mm-hmm. And of course, with every comic convention, we end up with a lot of interesting acquisitions. One of them, of course, was I got the 3 issues for the creator-owned work, Yumi and Ever, by Aletha Martinez. And you might know Aletha Martinez. She's artist for the Black Panther series, Iron Man. She's done a lot of other work as well. But this is her own creator-owned, written and drawn series, and it's beautiful. If you ever want just a beautiful example of her work, Yume and Ever is available from her website as well as at conventions when she's visiting your city. Also, Got another really wacky acquisition, Mustache Mayhem #1 by Josh Vassallo. It is the first issue of what could potentially be a long-running series of a green alien hipster addicted to bacon with a weaponized mustache. And probably the best one of those series that you will ever read. Very interesting. And then, of course, Shirtless Bear Fighter. We got a great HeroesCon variant from that new series that had just premiered in June. Hilarious work. It is wonderful. A couple of the creators were on hand for that. Jody Layup, Sebastian Gerner, Neil Vendrell. Who does art, were in attendance, and we got to chat with them a little bit. But the work is hilarious. If you haven't picked up Shirtless Bear Fighter, definitely do so. But there were a lot of other great people that we saw. Richard Rivera, we got to chat with, creator of Stabity Bunny, and several other people. Amy Chu, T. Franklin. Oh gosh, the list goes on and on. I'm forgetting everybody, but yeah.
So this is my first Heroes, and Steve, thank you so much for giving me shelter for those 4 days. I definitely appreciate it. We kicked it off by going to basically the flagship store around the convention, which was Heroes Are Hard to Find, and that was my first time there, so that was pretty cool to kick off the weekend that way. From a comic book perspective, I mentioned a lot of the people that we had visited their booths. Also, there's some other creators I know that like Sean Pryor and Luke Foster, a bunch of people I've known in the past. I could not get you guys away from Janet Leigh's booth most of the time.
Hey, she is the sole reason why my husband Jason comes with us, because he loves her work, and she's just an amazing person. She's just so much fun to chat with, and yeah, you will end up chatting for hours. So
on the floor, I also ran into a lot of people from 11 O'Clock Comics and Barb and Mike Myers. It was a really good convention. Really, really enjoyed it, and this won't be my only time going, I'm pretty sure. I didn't acquire that much because you're traveling. That goddamn Superman IDW newspaper collection, that was heavy enough. I do have to say that my favorite acquisition was the smallest one, which was a button of Nightwing, which basically you didn't see his face. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, what was it? Dick Butts or Dick's?
No,
Dick's button?
One of the artists had a series of buttons of comic book characters named by their first name, and when you got to Dick, you just saw Nightwing's butt. So
yeah, exactly. It was the Dick button. Okay.
Now Brian is not on this show for a very bearish reason, because he is up in Provincetown enjoying Bear Week. So we wanted to let you know that there's that he has a very good reason for not being on this call. At the same token, we also don't have Justin. Unfortunately, Justin's going through a lot of turmoil in his personal life, and he's not going to be part of the show for I hate using words like the foreseeable future. I don't want to sound all doom and gloom, but there's a lot of things that Justin has to get sorted out before he has the bandwidth to rejoin us. So over some of the next few shows, we're going to have some guests that are kind of going to be fill-ins for Justin. We're going to have guests that we're going to interview, but we're also going to bring some of our friends on just so that we have another voice on the mic. They'll normally be the Justin slot, for lack of a better term. If you notice, throughout this year, he's made very few appearances, and we certainly hope that Justin gets things sorted out, because it's been a rough time for him, and really, really hoping that those rough times end fairly soon. Apart from Heroes Con, I went to another convention. First time I actually worked a convention where I was the manager of vendor relations.
You had a walkie-talkie.
I had a walkie-talkie. And that was courtesy of my friends Dave and Sal, who run the Garden State Comic Fest. It's in its fifth show in 4 years, and for all of them I have been the moderator of the trivia contest. I continued in that role apart from whatever other duties I had. It's very different being part of a convention. It gave me a very different perspective of how difficult it is to actually get one of these things off the ground, but it also is kind of like theater in that you're a director, and then once it's up, you've got no control. You can rein some things in, but that's about it. It becomes its own. It becomes its own thing. In terms of the creators, I spent a lot of time with the Simonsons, first managing the lines at their booth and then just sitting with them. So that was a great experience. And unfortunately, I walked away from that with a severely strained and sprained ligaments in my foot. And my foot's currently in a boot, and I'm hoping by this upcoming Monday that will come off. So we're kind of giving you some personal details here. I also recently turned 50. Had a trip up to the Berkshires to celebrate that. Saw James Taylor in concert. We had a surprise guest of Bonnie Raitt. I get fireworks on my birthday. I know not everybody does since it's on July 4th. Apart from various other things, went for the first time to the Norman Rockwell Museum, which was a wonderful experience. And Steve, you also have something else brewing right now that you're still going to be a North Carolinian, but just not where you are.
That's correct. We are presently in the throes of buying a new house, selling our old house, trying to move, all these things. And of course, it's still, we're just riding the wave, really. Have no idea the timeline. We do know that Jason starts his new job very, very soon in Winston-Salem. So we're going to be moving at some point in the next month or two. But really excited to move to this new city. It's a little bit further away from Charlotte than I'd like, but you know what? We've got plenty of people that we know in Charlotte, so next time HeroesCon comes around, maybe I can bum off their couches. Or you know what? Just bite the bullet and get a hotel room, I guess.
And let me tell you, if things continue for me like they are, I'm going to be still swimming in points, so that's something we always have to recognize.
Woohoo! Swimming in points. That's pretty...
Swimming in points.
Swimming in points.
Hotel points. But, I wouldn't mind swimming in airline points, too. I never get that.
Oh, those would be so good. Oh, those lucky people.
It's like a train. I'm me in the damn train. God, I just...
You need to be one of those people taking a plane from Newark to New York.
Yeah. Yeah, I could do it. Hey, if it's on the company's tab, I can do that. I can do that anytime. Okay, so this is a little more personal talk than we're used to, but we figured that, we've been away for a while. We just figured we would update you and let you know that, hey, sometimes life gets in the way. Going forward, we're hoping to be back on, somewhat of our usual biweekly schedule. So, Steve, whether it be from conventions or whether it be from other acquisitions in the normal course of being a comic books fan, tell me something you're reading.
At the convention, there are, of course, and every convention has this, you have those wonderful dealers that have very cheap trades. We're talking $3, $4, $5 trades that, you may not have had a chance to pick up before. So while I was there...
Let me just interject. One of the dealers at Garden State Comic Fest, GSCF, Marvel $3 trades, hardcover.
Oh, wow.
Hardcovers.
Oh, that's lovely.
I wish I was a bigger Marvel fan. I got a Herc and I got a Thing. Yeah.
Those sound like personal problems. I got a Herc, I got a Thing.
And I got a giant-sized man thing. I did that. I did neglect to say that.
Giant-sized man thing.
Yeah, there's only 5 of them. I think I've got 3 of the 5. Someday I'll have all the giant-sized man things. I will have all of the giant-sized man things in my hands. Probably take 2 hands to hold them, but
they knew what they were doing with that title.
I'm also wondering if people even know what the hell we're talking about. Going back, 1970s, Marvel initiates a series of giant-sized comic books. In place of annuals. They were published on a quarterly basis. So you had giant-sized Spider-Man. You had giant-sized Fantastic Four. This is during the horror boom. So one of the 3 horror titles was giant-sized Man-Thing. I don't know if they really did get it. Yeah, so that's where that comes from. Giant-sized Man-Thing. And I did get it back at you. Going back to you, let's go back to your trades there. Sorry for interjecting, but, interesting content.
Oh, yeah. Well, I was just going to say they couldn't just call it Swamp Thing, but, So one of the things that you actually had picked up or had encouraged me to pick up was the trade for Common Grounds.
Yes.
Which, of course, I think you sold it on me by, hey, you like Astro City? Buy this. Basically that. There you go. So, of course, I did, and I was not dissatisfied with that. I was very happy because I finally got around to reading it. I was actually very excited to have this. And for anybody who hasn't read or even heard of Common Grounds, it was the brainchild of Troy Hickman, and it is specifically about a coffee shop or a chain of coffee shops that are built around the premise that heroes and villains and regular folks should all be able to come together and buy a cup of coffee and some donuts without getting a laser blast to the face. And so all the stories, and it's a collection, the trade is a collection of single issue short stories that were put out by Image, Top Cow Studios, all around that premise. So a lot of the people, it's just flashes of life. And like Bill had said to me, if you like Astro City, you'll definitely really like this. And there's a ton of great contributors to the collection. Michael Avon Emming's in it, Dan Jurgens, Chris Bocciolo, Carlos Pacheco. I mean, just George Perez even have all contributed to this collection, and it's great. Some really great stories in there, wonderful little characters, and actually some surprises that I didn't see coming. But if you like Astro City, if you like that mixture of the real world meets superheroes and how they interact when they're not punching each other's lights out or destroying whole city blocks with their evil schemes and or power blasts, this is a great book for you.
Cool. Well, something hit the stores this past Wednesday, which I've waited a long, long time for. Can you think of what it is?
My Little Pony, the Princess Special?
No, but that's a very good guess, I guess. No.
What is it, Bill? What is it?
For a long time, I have waited for the third part of the Mage trilogy from my fantasy husband in some reality, Matt Wagner. And we finally got the first issue of Mage, the Hero Denied. Not the first issue, it's actually a 0 issue. If people are familiar with Mage, you know that there are interludes between the main stories, the main 15 book stories. So what we have here is basically it's only 14 pages of story, and it's very action focused, but we finally have Kevin Matchstick back in this underground world of fighting demons. Matchstick is known as the Pendragon, and he's a little older, he's a little tubbier, certainly got a lot less hair, but Kevin's back, and he does wield the power of Excalibur to fight any infestations of demons that come about. That's part of his storyline. And in this story, we see that he is in a very bad part of the city, and he runs up against a new breed of, let's put quotations around it, hero called the Stees, who's all about flash and trying to find these demons, which are known as bukas. And when they actually come across them, the Stees, with all his flash and style, kind of comes up short, and Kevin really needs to get in there and save him. The thing that really makes this an enjoyable experience is Matt's work on Mage. It's very different from his cover work. It's a lot more fluid, I would say. I don't really have the proper vocabulary to talk about this in artistic terms, just in of how I interpret the aesthetic. But his interior pencils are very different from his covers, and it's very action-based. It certainly has me wanting more. Ends on a great note to start issue 1. So if this is your first experience being exposed to the world of Kevin Matchstick and Mage, probably doesn't suit you too well going with the 0 issue that sets off the final part of a trilogy. Go back to the Hero Defined. There's certainly been a lot of sales in Comixology and some other platforms that you can get that exposure in a fairly economic way. But I got Kevin back, at least for 15 issues, and this will be the finale of the story. But in terms of what I saw in this 0 issue to launch it off, very action based and really happy. It's an old friend is back, so made me happy.
That's awesome. That's pretty cool. And I haven't had the pleasure of starting to read Mage just yet, so I do have some of the original. I guess they're the sort of short trades or small trades. I don't know.
Well,
I guess maxi issues.
the mage books. Which
Yeah.
are like, yeah. So yeah, there's been various different. Oh my god, like if tracking the reprinting history of Mage is a headache. But I think you have the two Mage books, which I think go up to the first 6 issues, and it definitely gives you the terrain of where the story goes. So I may have spoiled something for you, so don't.
No.
Don't take it. Just in your head, just go beep at some point. Okay, what else you reading?
Oh, books? I don't know. Not reading nothing. Well, actually, another thing that you recommended that I pick up that I have not yet started because, well, I guess because I'm a procrastinator, was the first trade of Ex Machina. Again,
I can't believe you haven't read this.
Yeah, I know. I bet a lot of people listening are just sort of like, what do you mean he hasn't read it? I thought he said he liked Brian K. Vaughan. Yes, I do.
But then again, I've read 2 Hellboy trades in my life, so yeah. Yep. Gay gasp.
Gay gasp. No. Well, I guess mostly just been putting it off because I could never really find the justification or the time, in my weird con-addled brain, to ever go and look for the older trades. And, I don't know if they're out of print, but they're not something that I see very often when I'm at my comic shop. So it's probably just something out of sight, out of mind. But finally, I was able to pick up the first one. And, of course, I wasn't disappointed. I mean, I'm not necessarily an apologist for Brian K. Vaughan, BKV. Here we go. But I do love his stuff, and I haven't read one thing that I haven't enjoyed. I know some people have some strong opinions about him and some of his work. I love it, and I've loved everything I've read, and this is, of course,
I basically enjoyed everything he's written.
Yeah, I mean,
some remarkably touching things.
Oh gosh,
Pride of
why the
Baghdad,
last name?
Pride of Baghdad. Oh my god.
Yeah, I got that for Christmas one year and just cried myself to sleep. And Paper Girls is beautiful with the work of Cliff Chang to accompany it. That's his latest book.
First
issue,
and of course, it's free digital this week if you want to grab it.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, definitely grab it if you can.
Yep.
It is definitely great. It wouldn't disappoint. But Ex Machina, of course, is one of his older works from the 2000s, early 2000s, and it's, for those of you not familiar, the 3 people who don't know what it is basically I don't want to call him a failed superhero, but let's just say he didn't reach the heights of the success that he had hoped. But a superhero decides to run for office of mayor of New York City and ends up winning. And the first trade, or the first arc, really just highlights the first issues that he's been facing, or the first challenges that he'll be facing in his office. And, some of the challenges range from those that could probably be best helped by a superhero, but others are just the standard everyday, chaos that happens in a city like New York. And it is just very well drawn. The backup characters, the supporting characters, are really, really fleshed out in a way that you understand just as much of the world that the main character is brought into, being the mayor, as you do sort of the motivations for him as a hero, because it does flash back to when he was, first getting his superpowers and actually trying to use them to do good, and also the limitations of being now a person in the spotlight who's a politician and also is legally responsible now for a city of 10 million people. So really great. If you haven't read it, and of course I'm going to continue with all the rest of the trades once I find them. But definitely recommend Ex Machina.
Yeah, what a great TV series that would make.
Oh gosh, yeah. I'm surprised it hasn't been optioned yet.
Yeah, I am surprised. Yeah, it might be. I don't know if they could call it Ex Machina at this point. In the TV version because of that recent film, but there's a lot of layers, and as you said, just an amazing supporting cast.
Oh yeah,
amazing supporting cast, and it's making me want to read it again. Okay,
I'm starting to wonder if Shonda Rhimes may have read it while writing Scandal, because There's some echoes.
Yeah, when you get into stuff with Dave Wiley and Journal Moore, there's a lot of there's a lot of palace intrigue in a modern perspective.
And this predates Scandal by a few years, I
Oh
believe.
yeah. No, the first issue came out August 2004.
Yep. So again, if you're a fan of Scandal or House of Cards and want to read a comic series that has some similar elements, not completely the same, but has some similar political intrigue and backstabbing and overarching plots, definitely pick it up.
Right. And also keep in mind it does also reference some real life events too.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting perspectives. So
yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're going to continue with it, and I only physically have the first 2 trades because one of the local libraries by me used to have a very robust purchasing initiative, especially when it came to Marvel Ultimate and Vertigo and the more esoteric Wildstorm like Ex Machina was. It was a Wildstorm book, so not part of the Wildstorm universe, but was a Wildstorm book. I really wonder what trade dress it's under right now.
I definitely got an older edition, but I think it is now under Vertigo. Like if you were to get the later volumes in the series, and probably since then it's been reprinted, so I would imagine that it's all under Vertigo now.
Yeah, and it certainly is welcome under that banner.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going over to the sillier side of comic books for a little bit right now. Very recently, DC Comics published a series of specials where you saw team-ups between their own characters and the characters of the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes universe. So the 2 I'm going to talk about briefly, Batman and Elmer Fudd and Legion of Superheroes and Bugs Bunny. Batman and Elmer Fudd, which is written by the regular Batman writer Tom King, a very noirish tale of Elmer Fudd basically hunting wabbits in Gotham City, and it's impossible to read it without reading it in Elmer Fudd's voice. It's pretty interesting. One of his targets ends up being Bruce Wayne, and things get a little strange after that. There's also a backup, which is also written by Tom King with art by Byron Vaughns, which throws the whole rabbit season, duck season into a spin by adding the possibility of a bat season. So you might really enjoy that. For me, though, the best one was the Legion of Superheroes Bugs Bunny crossover. The basic story, the germ of the story is that Supergirl has an infection. She's in the future. The element that can cure her infection, it lost traces of it on Earth, ended about 300 years ago, so they have to go back to a time where traces of this element were plentiful. Brainiac 5 programs Computo to go back in time to retrieve Superboy. Instead of retrieving Superboy for a variety of reasons, he brings back Bugs Bunny.
Of course.
It's really funny the way that they treat Legion angst. This seems to have been like a bar fight among Legion of Superheroes fans. There are people who absolutely adore it, and people said that they couldn't get through 2 or 3 pages. I don't know the latter, how they cannot see the humor in in the way that they treat the Legion in this book. It's amazing. You have the main story, and then you have a backup, which is basically the same story, but in the main story you have it basically as a comic book. In the backup story, it's basically treated as a Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoon. Really, really inventive way of presenting the story in 2 fashions. So, big recommendation for Legion of Superheroes Bugs Bunny.
One thing that I wanted to say, because I don't want to feel that I slighted him, but Tony Harris does the art for Ex Machina, which every Ex Machina fan has been probably screaming at. Yes, Tony Harris with the distinctive look there for Ex Machina.
Yeah, there are some specials along the way where Tony doesn't do the art, but he basically maintained the position as artist through the entirety.
Yeah.
So good stuff. So yeah,
excellent.
Just a quick detour back to Ex Machina. All right, Well, again, we had the interview, and we just wanted to have a little short encapsulation of where we were and what we're doing. So we're going to end this episode, and when we end an episode of the Comic Book Bears, we end it with a segment we call the Woofs of the Week, where we highlight something, be it a comic book or a television program or a charitable initiative, anything under the sun that we think you, fair listener, may enjoy sampling. So, Steve, what is your Woof of the Week?
Well, it's another TV one, so for those of you playing Comic Book Bear Bingo, mark off that space now. My recommendation, or my woof, is a show from New Zealand called The Cul-de-sac. And the one-sentence pitch, The Walking Dead for New Zealand teens. Not to say there's zombies in this, but basically it opens up right after an apocalypse or apocalyptic event seemingly has obliterated all adults in Auckland, New Zealand. The children who are left without technology that works, basically rabid animals, and nightly electrical storms that disintegrate anybody who's stuck outside. In addition to that, there's an entire race of weird, sort of Morlockish clicking creatures that wouldn't be out of place in Will Smith's I Am Legend vampire look. So it's creepy, very interesting. There's a government conspiracy. There's technology gone wrong, all of that. And also a slightly younger KJ Apa, also known as Archie for those fans of Riverdale. You get to see him with his actual hair color. And his actual accent. So if you're interested in KJ Apa, or if you're interested in interesting Antipodean sci-fi TV series, The Cul-de-sac. First season was from, I believe, 2015 or 2016, and the second season just started up. If you are in New Zealand or Australia, or if you have other means of acquiring television shows from New Zealand.
My Woof of the Week is something that you can watch on Netflix. Everybody who knows me knows I watch a hell of a lot of documentaries, and the documentary I'm going to spotlight on my Woof is Orion, the Man Who Would Be King. It's directed by Jeannie Finley, who previously directed another basically music hoax-oriented documentary, The Great Hip Hop Hoax. And what Orion deals with is the story of Jimmy Ellis. Jimmy was a singer who emerged in the wake of Elvis's death in 1977. He signed with Sun Records and was billed as Orion. And Orion would always wear a mask. He was a little too nuanced to just call him an Elvis sound-alike, but there definitely was a great similarity between the two men and their singing styles. So there were generated a campaign of whether Orion was Elvis reincarnated or Elvis was still alive and operating under this name. And it goes through his, not just his professional life, but also his personal life, and certainly some sadness along the way. But it really, really holds your interest. And if you were somebody who ever saw Bubba Hotep, this basically is a real life Bubba Hotep. So, and the damn shame is the guy really did have talent on his own, and in terms of the connections to Elvis, there is a speculation in the movie that comes at the perfect point in the movie where you just kind of drop your mouth with one revelation. So I'm not going to say what that is. You're going to have to watch it yourself. So that's my Wolf of the Week. And again, as I said, it's available on Netflix right now. Orion, the Man Who Would Be King. Okay, we're going to wrap this one up. Again, we are the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on the Twitter and the Tumblr and the Instagram as Comic Book Bears. You can find us on the Facebook as Comic Book Bears podcast. If you want to listen to us, you can do so through iTunes, through Stitcher Radio, and very soon through Spotify. Did you hear that?
Ooh.
We're going to be on Spotify if everything goes according to plan. So
that was more of a spooky ooh. I apologize for that.
No,
it was more.
Ooh, is that better?
Ooh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay, the more optimistic ooh. Yeah, we're trying to get things in order so that we can be part of Spotify's new platform that brings podcasts into their listening app. So we're going to do our best there, folks. We hope this works. And naturally, if you want to reach out to us, you can always do so by sending us an email to comicbookbears@gmail.com. So until next time, I'm Billy Z.
I'm Steve Morey.
You're going to hear a wolf and an explosion. We'll be back real soon. And we mean it this time real soon. Take care, everyone. Wolf!
She's so malicious and so delicious, superstitious, super suspicious. Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman. We just rewind, we'll just be fine. We'll just be fine, you just be mine. We just rewind, you just be fine. You just be mine, you just be mine. You show me everything. You feel me everywhere. You pretend that you care. I fix up all your time. I knew you were mine. I shine like through the sky.